Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm bringing you the second half of my December wrap up where I attempted to read 30 books in 30 days. So I did it, spoiler alert, I did manage to read 30 books in 30 days. It was exhausting and it left me feeling really burnt out and not really enjoying reading at the end of the month. So I probably wouldn't actually recommend doing this for anybody who is interested. It has left me with the same kind of feeling that some of those like really long readathons or really intense readathons that exist on BookTube, like I did a 24-hour in 48-hour readathon a good couple of years ago and did a vlog from it, and I have been left with the same feeling of like, oh god, I don't want to read ever again off the back of it. It was at times fun and I'm pleased with the number of books I managed to get through, and we definitely have had some slam dunk books in there. So I will now go through the second half, the latter 15 books that I read through the month of December. Feel free to check out my first reading wrap up, which I will link down below, that covers the first half of them. So middle of the month, which actually the 15th book mark was closer to, like, I read this on like the 18th or 19th of December. It really got skewed quite late. I was constantly playing catch up from just like a horrendous work schedule at the beginning of the month. I mean, I didn't start the challenge until day 4. Fucking stupid idea on my part. Seriously, don't do this to yourself. But anyway, I had a bit of a reading slump, had pulled it back together with a fun paranormal novella that I was sort of mentioned in the previous one. And then I opened a Christmas present from a friend early, and that really helped me get back into the groove. And that was All the Living and the Dead by Hayley Campbell. This is a non-fiction book where Hayley interviews various people who work in death industries in various ways, people who like work with dead bodies or with the dying quite regularly. So we get to meet people like somebody who works in a crematorium, an executioner, a bereavement midwife, a grave digger, all sorts of different people like that. This book was freaking stunning. It was so beautiful in places, and it was really, really fascinating as a way of exploring what is a very taboo subject. I'm actually going to be putting out a video on books about death and a separate review of this book because of how much I really enjoyed it, and it reminded me that this is an area that I really love reading about, and I've actually read quite a few books out there about death and kind of the taboo subject that it is. This is quite a short book, and I blitzed it so fast, and it was so light and easy to read and surprisingly humorous, but definitely had some really poignant moments in it, so I would totally recommend it to anybody interested in non-fiction at all. Then we did a cute little short story that turned out to be 3 short stories, and I really didn't enjoy it. This was The Life of a Stupid Man, that at 55 odd pages was already going to be a fairly short book, and then it turns out it's actually 3 short stories in one. And I knew this about myself already, but December has really solidified that I don't like short stories. I can't even really tell you what The Life of a Stupid Man was about. It's already been wiped from my brain by the other like 13 books I fucking read in December. Short stories just don't make an impact on me. Maybe I have a short attention span. Maybe I need more to keep me invested. I don't know. But I just felt like I skimmed everything and I didn't really care. So not mine. Not for me. Not for me. Then I'd kind of had a like comfort audiobook on the go. I re-listened to World War Z, An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks. I've listened to this audiobook 5 times now. I fucking love this audiobook. It is an oral history of a like fake war with zombies, a like zombie apocalypse spread across our world, but really trying to nail down like how would countries respond in a really realistic way. And it's a series of different interviews that happen like 20 years post, 10 or 20 years like post the zombie apocalypse occurring, and sort of the humanity's attempts to like take back the world. I think the audiobook especially is fantastic. It has a huge host of characters, lots of different accent work, lots of real commitment to the storytelling, and I just generally love this book. It's such a comfort read for me. Then I read Make Room, Make Room by Harry Harrison. This was like a dystopian fiction that was set in a world where population was had sort of exploded. There wasn't allowed to be birth control, and it was about trying to handle the like drain on resources that would be. There was like a vague storyline of like a crime trying to sort of like detective story where a guy gets murdered who's actually quite high up in like political intrigue, a bit of like sort of organised crime kind of vibe, and it's about a policeman trying to discover who did it, and then like a torrid love affair that occurs. And basically this book was like a solid 3-star, didn't really care, didn't really leave much impact. I didn't think we got much from the world building, and it felt sort of a little bit tired, and I don't particularly enjoy procedural crime books anymore, meaning that the actual storyline for me I wasn't really invested in and didn't really grab me, and so because there wasn't as much about the world building as I wanted, it felt quite flat. Apparently this is sort of the genesis of the idea of a movie called Soylent Green or something like that, that is supposed to be really, really good. So I think this is like, it's quite an old book now, so I think it's one that it's gone on to like inspire more things, but like with so many of these things where it's like one of the earlier examples of a genre, people have done it since in a way that I think is better, and I think I'm just tired of dystopian books in general. It's an area that I used to read a lot in, and I kind of feel a bit bored of those tropes. So like, solid dystopian read if you like dystopian books, but not really for me. Then we came back on nice and strong with Ivan Turgenev's Rudin. This is a Russian classic, and I actually read 2 Turgenevs the later half of December and really deeply enjoyed both of them. This is about an enigmatic man called Rudin who like joins a family, a collection of people, and kind of shakes everything up. This is the second Turgenev I'd ever read, and I just really enjoy his writing style. There's something very lyrical and pretty about it. It's one of these books that's really hard to explain why it particularly appeals. It's very much just a character study. It's about sort of the, I guess the mid, like upper middle class of sort of Russian bourgeoisie kind of class people, and sort of there's a lot of social expectations like who can marry who and who's coming from money and things like that, but yeah, it's just something which, it's just a bunch of people sit around talking, and it's the kind of book that in a modern context I really wouldn't be interested in, but I was so invested and I really enjoyed all of these characters. So yeah, one that if you like Russian literature, I think you should check it out. It really was a bit of a rollercoaster in December where we were ricocheting between great and not great, and unfortunately The Man Who Was Thursday by K Chesterton was super not great for me. This is like a classic spy novel, which is about a bunch of anarchists and an undercover policeman who tries to infiltrate their group because he thinks that they're going to do some kind of big like terrorist action, and then it proceeds to get more and more absurd from there. It was the kind of novel that by the end I didn't really know what was going on anymore, and it just felt silly. And again, possibly it's one of the earlier examples of like absurdist work of its time, and sort of the nightmarish paranoia, political humour, best spy book ever apparently. But for me it just felt really tired and flat, and like I kind of saw a lot of the like twists coming before we got there, and it felt like they're jokes that people have sort of riffed off of so many times before that you do see them coming a mile off, which means that they don't work anywhere near as well anymore. I'd love to be able to go back in time and read this like when it was first published, because I'm sure it was really revolutionary at the time, but now for a modern audience I think it's kind of a bit played out, and it didn't work for me, and I really didn't enjoy any of the characters and wasn't very invested in any of them, so it just felt silly for silly's sake. Then I read Barracoon, the story of the last black cargo by Zora Neale Hurston. This is an interview of a gentleman who was the last official black slave, and I thought Barracoon was his name. Turns out, ignorant as fuck as I am over here, Barracoon is actually the term for like the pen that you would put slaves in. I had no fucking idea, but it details his life basically being like taken or sort of like given up by sort of like a rival tribe in Africa, and then being taken across to America, and then him getting his freedom, and sort of what his life was like in America post getting his freedom. It was really lovely. I actually listened to it on an audiobook because there was a lot of dialect that as I was reading it in physical form I was like, okay, I'm missing bits of this is going to work better in an audiobook form. Really enjoyed that side of things. It was a very short book, very lyrical, had a real lovely like rhythm and beat to it, and was just a wonderful little autobiographical like snapshot. And you get the lovely sort of bits, I say autobiographical, he's being interviewed by Zora Neale Hurston, and you get the like snippets either side of each episode of his life with her interview, where you know they sit down and they have lemonade together, or like he talks about a different part of his life at that point and like how their relationship goes as well. And I really enjoyed that kind of self-insert from the non-fiction author gathering that information. So lovely quintessential piece of black history that I think is totally worth a read for anybody who likes history in general. Then I read Defiant Heart by Brighton Walsh. This was a truly mediocre romance, contemporary romance book, which was a slight, like, I say enemies to lovers, like mild irritation to lovers, forced proximity thing that read like a Hallmark movie that then just kind of tanked. Like, he's a policeman who keeps arresting her because she's like trying to peacefully protest on his, I think, sister's property, which is a hotel up for a big like article or piece in some local newspaper and she needs to stop being a troublemaker, and then like fairly contrived events ensue to sort of force them together. There's sort of a very dull miscommunication at the end that then gets resolved. This is the kind of book that if it hadn't been for the 30 books in 30 days challenge, I would have just DNF'd it. But at this point, I'd read 3 romance books, tried to anyway, in a row where I'd like DNF'd them partway through. And this was just the lesser of all the evils. And this was where the challenge didn't feel like it was actually feeling good at that point, because I was definitely just reading for reading's sake, because I was like, I cannot waste another 20 pages on another romance book I'm not going to actually do. I've done 60 already. I don't have the time to be wasting these reading, and that sucked, to be like interacting with reading in that way. So yeah, didn't enjoy it, 2 stars, and also didn't enjoy the position that I'd put myself in with this particular challenge. Then it just continued to go downhill. I read The Gambler by Dostoevsky. This is another Russian classic. It's about a gentleman who has a gambling problem, who he has basically everybody in this book has a gambling problem, and it's their like interactions with gambling in general. And there's like a rich aunt or grandma at one point who gambles away all of her finances, which then means that there's no inheritance, and it's sort of a bit of a torrid love story. And basically, frankly, I didn't care about any of the characters at all, or what was going on, or the gambling. So it felt very like pointless to me, the whole experience. And this is one of these ones where like, reading is so weird, because I can't explain to you why I really enjoyed Rudin and why I really didn't enjoy The Gambler, even though they probably are relatively similar, because it's just a bunch of people hanging around chatting about their like circumstances and how they can or can't improve themselves with like a Russian backdrop. So in theory, they should be quite similar reading experiences, but I loved Rudin so much and really did not enjoy The Gambler at all. Tried it in audiobook form, tried it in this form, didn't really matter what. And like the translations were both different, so I don't think it was the translator either. And I can't give you anything more meaningful other than just this wasn't my taste. So I'm really hoping that isn't like a sign of Dostoevsky in general, because I've got Crime and Punishment over here, somewhere here, that I want to read one day, because I have a pretty version of it. And if I didn't enjoy him this length, am I really going to enjoy him like that length? But we'll find out, won't we, at some point. Then we kind of continue, and there's a lot of sort of just meh coming your way. I'm so sorry. This is now going to be a bit of a bummer of a wrap up. I read Man Tiger by Eka Kurniawan. This I enjoyed, but I was expecting something very different from it based on the back. This is about a Indonesian myth, which is basically this idea of like a mythical tiger that can kind of live inside you. It's sort of a motif that I've read in some other books from this part of the world before, and it's about a gentleman who, like quite a young man, who like murders a guy in this kind of opening scene by like ripping out his throat. Quite enjoyed that scene, given that I'm interested in reading more body horror at the moment. That was quite fun. And then sort of delved into the reasons why he killed the man, and like the two families that like the man's family and the tiger boy's family, and the ways that they were like interconnected in the past. And it was really sort of an exploration of like generational trauma and things like that. And like, it was good. It was really interesting. I was very invested in the characters and I liked it, but I wanted more from the tiger, and the tiger seemed to feature at the very beginning and at the very end, and then the bit in the middle was just mainly a load of stuff about domestic abuse, which again was like enjoyable is the wrong word, but like it was a good read, but it wasn't kind of what was pitched. I was expecting this to be way more like funky mythical tiger stuff, and instead I just kind of read about a woman getting beaten quite a few times. So yeah, felt like mixed response to this book. I would definitely recommend it. I think it is a good read, but I think you need to like tweak your expectations going in, and I wanted so much more from the tiger. It was a really cool character, really cool like weird mythology of the tiger living inside him, and sort of almost like a werewolf but were-tiger vibe going on, and like really fun interaction with like animal mythology stuff, and I just wanted more from that area. Then I read Jean Rye's Wide Sargasso Sea. This is a prequel to Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and it looks at Bertha, who is the mad woman in the attic, basically the ex-wife of Rochester, I think that's his name. I've not read Jane Eyre, and I think it's one like this book suffered because of that fact, so I think my enjoyment is more because of me rather than the book. And you might be like, well, why did you read it, Emma, if you've not read Jane Eyre? But like, I'd been led to believe that it was one that you could do without having read Jane Eyre, and it was fine, but I think I would have got more out of it had I known a little bit more of the context. It's the prequel, so it's kind of Bertha's life and then her meeting Rochester, and then like the kind of gaslighting that goes on, and the idea of like women being crazy and hysteria and stuff, and it's wrapped up in race as well, because she's a Creole heiress who's like a white woman living out in Jamaica. Yes, Jamaica, and sort of lots of interactions there about sort of her role in Jamaica and sort of her heritage and the position that puts her in. And then there's some nice parallels between like a fire that happens in her childhood and a fire that happens at the end of the book, which possibly is something that happens in Jane Eyre. And I think this is where my lack of knowledge of Jane Eyre meant that a lot of the symbolism in the book went over my head. So the intention is to read Jane Eyre in 2024, and maybe then I will look back on this book and be like, ah yes, very good, I can see what you did there. Maybe I'll reread it, who knows. But yeah, I think this is one to not do unless you've read the original, which you might be like, well duh Emma, but shush, okay? Sometimes we read things out of order and then we suffer for them. Then I read On the Eve by Turgenev. Told you there was another one coming this way. This is about a torrid love affair between he is a Bulgarian revolutionary and a Russian woman who is basically way too high above his station, and the Bulgarian revolutionary is like a fun personality who's invited into this wealthy family, who's very interesting to talk to, but God forbid he should ever marry the daughter. And it's about their kind of it's a very tragic love story actually. It was beautiful but desperately sad. I think more sad than Rudin. I think Rudin had a sort of relatively amicable finish, whereas this one is bleak to say the least. But yeah, again, similar to Rudin, just lovely reading experience, like really pleasant, really enjoyable, very invested in all the characters, very invested in the sort of writing, and it just kind of flew by. So I think I need to read more Turgenev, or I need to find out who's translating these ones, because they are both the same editions, and is there an issue with the translator I went for Dostoevsky rather than specifically the author. But yeah, really enjoyable. We're getting there, team, we can do this. We have 3 more to go. Then I read Caroline's Heart by Chant. This is a cute little romance novella. It is a fantasy Western trans romance, to get all the buzzwords in there. Really fun actually. This started to bring my reading back up. We had a bit more of a like home run. We're you know, nearly at the finish line, kind of last wind, whatever the words is that I'm looking for. And yeah, this is a lovely story about a trans man who is interacting with like a local witch who has got a past lover who has died that she's trying to resurrect, and then in doing so the trans man gets involved in an accident, and instead the witch has to use the spell, the like resurrection spell, to save him rather than to bring back her beloved. And it's about sort of their like forced proximity due to that, and then like sort of discovering a love for each other. It was wonderful. It was really sweet, really lovely, very invested in the characters, a surprising amount of world building, a surprising amount of like character growth, given that it was quite a short book. And I think I need to check out more from Chant in the future, because there is quite a large back catalogue of books that they have, and quite a few novellas in this area. So yeah, really interesting. Then I read Sing for the Dead, which is book 2 in the London Shifters series by Piper J. Drake. I read book 1 a couple of months back and really enjoyed, and book 2 didn't work as well for me. It's a werewolf book set in a zombie London, or at least that's what book 1 was. Book 2 is in the same setting, but it focuses on a were-leopard, which apparently has a bunch of different mythology to it, and then some kind of like banshee Valkyrie type person, bunch more mythology attached to her. And basically my problem was, it's a novella and you've already got a world that's kind of established, and you've gone way too far with your world building. Like, we're adding in way too many races, way too many sort of rules and regulations for their different species, and like how they like to interact and kind of cultures and stuff. There's a different big bad. It all gets very convoluted, and because there was like no real room for the romance, I didn't believe the chemistry, and that's why I'm here in a paranormal novella. I don't really give a shit about the world building. I want there to be a serious like spice between the two people, and I didn't really care about them as a couple, so because of that it fell really flat for me. And then the final book was A Silent Fury, the El Bordeaux Mine Fire by Yuri Herrera, and this was wonderful. This was I listened to an audiobook, and it is like a long form essay piece, I guess, that was written about a mine fire in the 1920s in Mexico. And the fact that the company tried to cover up a lot of what happened in there, and sort of it being one of the earliest examples of like a disaster at work, and then also the workers' rights that came from that. And like the story is so harrowing and so intense, and the narrator does a really good job of like, you really feel the injustice, and like you are with them, sort of filled with rage at how these men were treated and how it was covered up, and like how they were failed in numerous different ways over the years. But then you get to see like the ramifications from that, and the way that things have changed and improved, and sort of what came from the back of that. Really fascinating read all around. Lovely little non-fiction about, again, a part of the world I don't know much about, and I love like workers' rights stories from like a historical perspective. I love like the Radium Girls and books like that, so this was really, really cool. That's all from me. That's everything I read in December part 2, and don't do this challenge. Basically, it's horrible, and I haven't finished a single book in January. So have a wonderful reading week. Let me know down below, have you read any of these books? What do you think? Are you tempted to try and do the challenge? Have you learnt from my lesson? What's the vibes all around? Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.